The emergency department at Rainier County Medical Center never slept. It only shifted its weight from one crisis to the next. At 6:12 a.m., Tacoma was still dark and wet. Rain stitched the windows in thin lines, and the streetlights outside smeared into pale halos. Inside, fluorescent panels buzzed with a flat tone that lived behind every sound. Monitors chimed, wheels squeaked. A voice at triage rose, then dropped back into a tired murmur. The air tasted like disinfectant over old coffee, like something clean, trying, and failing. Dr. Naomi Vale pushed a crash cart down the main corridor at a steady pace. Not hurried, not dragging. Steady like she had a metronome inside her chest. The cart's drawers rattled softly over seams in the tile. She kept both hands on the cold rail thumbs planted in the same place. Her eyes did not wander the way most people's did. They moved in a pattern. Exit sign, fire extinguisher, alarm pull. The gap between the linen closet and trauma 2. 31 steps from the supply alcove to trauma 2 if you cut the corner tight. 36 if you did not. She counted without moving her lips. Behind her, the physician workroom door swung open. Dr. Colin Shaw came out like he owned the hall. Mid-40s, clean-shave hair still damp. His white coat was pressed and bright, the kind of white that looked wrong in a place where blood lived in the grout. He carried a coffee cup that smelled burned. His phone lit his face blue. "Vela," he said, pitching his voice so it carried. "We're not strolling a museum." Naomi did not look back. "Morning, Dr. Shaw," she said, and kept the same pace. Colin slid around her shoulder, brushing the cart as he passed. The cart wobbled once. Naomi's hands tightened just enough to steady it. Colin kept going. At the nurse's station, charge nurse Kira Benton watched the exchange and leaned toward an intern with new scrubs and a too-shiny stethoscope. "That's Dr. Vale," Kira said. "She's nice, just slow." The intern glanced down the hall. "Maybe she's careful." Kira's smile held no warmth. "Careful gets you buried in this place." Naomi parked the crash cart in the alcove between trauma 1 and trauma 2, where the light flickered just enough to make skin look gray. She opened the top drawer and ran her checklist with her hands. Defib pads. Sealed. Cables coiled clean. Oxygen tank rotated so the valve faced out. Suction tubing clipped. Airway kit shifted so the smallest tube sat on top and the sizes stepped down beneath it. A nurse passed without looking. A paramedic rolled a gurney by talking into his radio and did not slow. Here, competence was assumed until it failed loudly. Naomi straightened. The overhead light caught her left wrist. A bracelet circled it, woven from faded 550 cord, frayed at the edges. The clasp was a small strip of metal worn smooth by years of touch. She covered it with her sleeve without thinking. She stepped into trauma 2 and took up her usual spot near the wall. Not in the center, not at the head of the bed. Near the wall where she could see both doors, the monitors, and the strip of hallway beyond the glass. If you watched closely, you would notice she never turned her back to an open doorway. She angled her body so one shoulder faced the hall, like she was keeping a corner. Her gaze tracked movement 2 rooms away without staring. She knew where the sharps bin sat, where the extra suction canister lived, how long it took the automatic doors to open. Quiet knowledge stored the way other people stored gossip. Kira breezed in with a clipboard calling out assignments. "Vale, you're on minor trauma until Shaw says otherwise." Naomi nodded. "Copy." Kira's eyes flicked to Naomi's sneakers. Dark, scuffed, quiet. "You always talk like you're on a radio," Kira said. Naomi's mouth moved almost a smile, but it did not land. Habit. A gust hissed through the ventilation grate above the bay. It was just the building breathing, but the sound hit a certain frequency, and Naomi's fingers twitched. For half a beat, the fluorescent buzz shifted into something heavier, rhythmic. She blinked once, slow. Her gaze found the wall clock, second hand sweeping. She inhaled tasting disinfectant and stale coffee. She exhaled, counting in her head. 1, 2, 3. The room settled back into itself. Across the department, a toddler cried. A monitor alarmed, then quieted. Colin's voice carried from Trauma 1. I need labs on that chest pain now. Find me an open CT slot. Naomi stayed where she was, hands loose, eyes working. She watched Kira tag charts, watched Ethan Price fumble with a glove cuff, watched a tech wheel a portable X-ray unit pass the doorway, close enough to kiss the crash cart. Naomi stepped forward and nudged the cart 2 inches left without touching the tech. The tech never looked up. The overhead speaker crackled, then cleared into a dispatcher's clipped voice. Rainier ER incoming in 4 minutes. Workplace injury. Male 48. Respiratory distress. Naomi's eyes went to the bay doors. Her hands tightened once on nothing at all, then relaxed. In the corridor, the crash cart sat ready in its alcove drawers, aligned cables, clean oxygen valve facing out. The overhead speaker clicked off, leaving a thin aftertaste of static in the air. Naomi held her gaze on the ambulance bay doors. The hallway beyond the glass looked washed out rain light reflecting on wet concrete. Kira's voice floated from the nurse's station. Trauma 2, get ready. Naomi moved first to the crash cart. Not fast. Exact. She checked the oxygen valve with her fingertips, then the drawer where the needle kit lived. Her hand hovered for a moment, then closed the drawer again. She rolled the cart forward 2 feet, so it sat square to the bay, close enough to reach without crossing anyone's path. The doors burst open. Cold air rushed in, carrying rain and diesel and the metallic bite of the blood. 2 paramedics came in at a run with a gurney that rattled under the weight of a man, strapped down and half buried in blankets. His face was a gray shade that belonged outdoors in winter, not under hospital lights. His eyes were open, glassy with effort. Every breath looked like it cost him money. 48-year-old male, the lead medic said, voice tight and practiced. Construction site. Steel beams swung, pinned his right chest against scaffolding. Complaining of chest pain, short of breath. We gave oxygen. He's getting worse. They rolled into Trauma 2. Naomi stepped aside to let them in, then slid into her spot near the wall without taking her eyes off the patient. She tracked the movement of hands' tubing straps, the way the man's ribcage rose unevenly. Colin Shaw pushed into the bay a second later, gloves already snapping at his wrists like punctuation. He took the head of the bed by instinct, the place people looked toward when things went bad. All right, Colin said, let's move. What's his pressure? 100/70, Kira answered, already cutting the shirt up the center. Heart rate 120. The medic kept talking. Breath sounds diminished on the right. No obvious open wound. Bruising to the lateral chest. He's alert, but anxious. Naomi watched the monitor as it came to life. The numbers settled, then began to drift. Oxygen saturation, 96, then 94. The patient tried to speak. It came out as a wet rasp. I can't. Get air. You're in the right place, Colin said, too smooth, like he was talking someone off a ledge. He pressed a stethoscope to the man's chest. Listened. Moved the bell. Listened again. He frowned, diminished on the right. Get me an X-ray. Kira called it out. Portable X-ray to Trauma 2. Naomi's eyes went to the man's neck. The skin there looked tight. She watched the effort in his shoulders, the way he was using muscles people did not use for normal breathing. She watched his fingertips pale and damp. On the monitor, oxygen saturation slipped to 92. The respiratory rate climbed. 24, 28. Colin leaned in, fingers pressing along the ribs. The patient flinched and made a sound that was part cough, part choke. Colin pulled back. We need imaging to confirm, he said. Possible pneumo. We do not stab people in the chest because we feel dramatic. Kira shot a quick look at Naomi, then back to the patient. X-ray is on the way. Naomi did not speak right away. She watched the man's chest rise. The right side lagged behind the left. His lips were turning a faint, bruised color. The monitor ticked down again. 90. 89. Naomi stepped forward just one step. Not into Colin's space. Close enough to be heard. Tension, she said. Colin did not turn. He was looking toward the door, waiting for the portable unit like it was a lifeline. "The X-ray is coming," he said louder, as if volume made time behave. The patient's eyes went wide. He tried to sit up against the straps. "Please." "Sir, stay still," Kira said, voice firm, hands on his shoulders. Naomi's attention narrowed. She saw the trachea shift a fraction off center when he swallowed. She saw the way the skin over his collarbones pulled taut. She heard a thin wheeze, and then the sudden quiet of air that did not move enough. 87. Naomi moved. She did not announce herself. She did not ask permission. She reached the crash cart in a straight line and opened the drawer with the needle kit. Her hands unwrapped the catheter with calm speed. Packaging fell into the trash in clean motions, not frantic ones. Colin's head snapped up when he noticed movement. "Vale, what are you doing?" Naomi did not look at him. She was already at the patient's right chest, fingers palpating the ribs, locating the space between them with the certainty of someone who trusted anatomy more than hope. She cleaned the skin, fast, firm. She positioned the needle. "Kira," Naomi said, voice low, "hold him steady." Kira hesitated for a breath, then did it. She planted her palms and locked her elbows. Colin stepped toward Naomi, sharp and offended. "Stop. We are not doing this without imaging." Naomi inserted the needle. It went in smooth angled just so. For a fraction of a second, there was resistance, and then a give. A hiss filled the room. A rush of air escaping under pressure, quick and ugly like a tire, finally giving up its secret. The patient jolted, eyes squeezing shut. Then his chest expanded more evenly on the next breath. He sucked air in like a starving man. Color started to creep back into his face. On the monitor, oxygen saturation jumped. 91, 94. The room fell silent. Even the portable unit rolling down the hall seemed to slow. Colin stared at Naomi as if she had spoken in a language he did not know. His jaw worked once. His gaze flicked from the catheter to the monitor to Naomi's hands. Naomi kept her fingers in place, steadying the line. "We need a chest tube," she said. "Now." Kira's voice came back. "Chest tube tray. Right now." The intern Ethan hovered near the door, eyes huge. He looked like he wanted to help and did not know where to put his hands. Colin recovered first. He reached for authority the way some people reached for air. "All right," he said, forcing his voice into calm. "Good. Good call. Let's set up. Vale, you got lucky." Naomi glanced at him for the first time. Her eyes were dark and flat and awake. "Not luck," she said. "Pressure." Colin's mouth tightened. He turned away, reclaiming the head of the bed. "Chest tube," he repeated, as if it had been his idea from the beginning. "Prep the site. Get analgesia. Someone call respiratory." Naomi stepped back to her spot near the wall, hands loose at her sides. The fluorescent panels caught the 550 cord at her wrist for half a second, and then her sleeve slid down again. The portable X-ray finally arrived. The tech wheeled it in, breathless, and stopped short when he saw the catheter already in place. His eyes flicked to Naomi, then away. Kira worked quickly, face set. She did not speak to Naomi, but she did not look at her the way she had before. It was not respect, yet. It was recalculation. As they prepped for the chest tube, the patient kept breathing. His eyes found Naomi once, and he held her gaze like he was trying to anchor himself to something solid. "Thank you," he whispered. Naomi nodded once, nothing more. Colin placed the chest tube with hands that were now careful for a different reason. He talked through it for the room, teaching as he went, but his eyes kept flicking toward Naomi as if the bay had shifted under his feet, and he was checking that it stayed put. When the tube was secured and the suction canister began to bubble, the patient's numbers steadied into a safer range. The sound in the room softened. People exhaled without realizing they had been holding it. Kira stripped off her gloves and tossed them. "He's stable for CT," she said. Colin nodded. "Send him. And document that we did an emergent decompression for suspected tension pneumo." Naomi watched the gurney roll out, the patient's hand resting on the blanket now, instead of gripping it. She waited until the doors swung shut and the bay was suddenly too bright and too clean again. Her hands went to the sink. Water ran hot. Soap cut through the smell of blood and rain. She rinsed. dried, looked at her reflection in the steel panel above the sink the way her eyes sat in her face like they belonged to someone older. The department noise swelled again, filling the space the crisis had left behind. Naomi stepped out into the hall and walked toward the break room without changing her pace. The coffee smell met her before the door did. The break room door swung inward on a soft hinge that needed oil. Warm air hit Naomi's face, thick with burnt coffee and microwaved leftovers. The room was small and beige, in a way that felt intentional, like someone believed neutral walls could keep bad days from leaving stains. A glass pot sat on the warmer coffee, cooked down to bitterness. Naomi poured a cup anyway. The liquid came out dark and thin, the smell sharp enough to scrape the back of her throat. She did not add cream or sugar. She held the cup with both hands, palms against the paper heat sleeve, and stood facing the blank wall. Behind the wall, the hospital made its familiar sounds, voices in passing, a cart rolling, a monitor alarm that rose and fell, the building breathing through vents. For a moment, that was all. Then the sound changed. It was subtle at first, a low rhythmic thump that did not belong to the floor below. The vibration came through the window glass and the metal frame, a steady beat that grew heavier by the second. Naomi's shoulders tightened as if a hand had closed around the back of her neck. Her gaze locked on the wall clock. The second hand swept smooth and careless. The beat deepened. Rotor. Not the faint whisper of a ceiling fan. This was weight. This was air being beaten into submission. A medical helicopter passed overhead on its way to the rooftop pad. Routine? Civilian. It did not matter. The beige wall in front of Naomi lost its edges. The paint turned to canvas, stretched tight over poles. The air in the room stopped smelling like disinfectant and stale coffee. It became dust and fuel and hot metal. Something coppery rode the back of her tongue. Her hands remembered pressure dressings before her mind caught up. Her fingers curled as if they were already holding gauze, already leaning into a wound that would not stop. Naomi set the coffee cup down on the counter with care. She kept her eyes open. She did not let the room disappear entirely. The rotor beat moved off, fading toward the roof. She inhaled slow, held it, released it. Her jaw unclenched in fractions. Her left hand slid to her wrist beneath the sleeve. The 550 cord pressed into her skin, rough where it had frayed. The metal clasp was cool, a small, hard certainty. Naomi counted backward in her head. 10, 9, 8. The room came back in layers like focus returning to a camera lens. 7, 6, 5. The beige wall was a wall again. The counter was laminate. The coffee smelled burned, not smoky. 4, 3, 2. Her pulse was steady, but her skin felt too tight on her bones. She flexed her fingers once, then let them rest at her sides. The door opened. Charge nurse Kira Benton stepped in, a water bottle in her hand. She slowed when she saw Naomi standing still, both hands braced on the counter, as if she was keeping herself upright. "You okay?" Kira asked. Naomi nodded without looking over. "Just needed a minute." Kira's eyes flicked to the coffee pot, and then to Naomi's wrist. The sleeve had ridden up enough to show the bracelet. For a heartbeat, Kira looked like she wanted to ask something, but her mouth stayed closed. She took her bottle from the fridge, twisted the cap, drank, and set it back. "That guy in trauma too," Kira said, voice more careful than before. "He stabilized fast." Naomi kept her gaze on the wall clock. "He had to." Kira shifted her weight. Her tone stayed casual, but the question underneath it was not. "You saw it before anyone else." Naomi looked at Kira then. Her eyes were calm, but they did not invite closeness. "You hear enough alarms, you learn what they mean." Kira held Naomi's gaze for a second, then looked away first. She reached for the door handle. "Coffee's awful," Kira said. Naomi let out a small breath that might have been a laugh if it had gone farther. "It always is." Kira left. The door closed. Naomi stood another moment, letting the quiet settle. She picked up the cup and took a sip. The bitterness grounded her, sharp and real. She swallowed, then poured the rest out into the sink. The dark liquid spiraled away. Back in the corridor, the emergency department felt louder, more human. People moved with practiced urgency, voices overlapping. Naomi walked toward the nurse's station at her steady pace, the kind that made others think she was not in a hurry. She was. She simply refused to let it show. Ethan Price was at the computer, shoulders hunched, trying to enter orders with hands that still shook a little from adrenaline. He looked up as Naomi approached. "Dr. Vale," he said quickly. "That decompression. I have read about it, but I have never seen it done." Naomi paused beside him. "Now you have." Ethan swallowed. "How did you know it was tension without imaging?" Naomi's eyes went past him to the hallway beyond the glass of Trauma 1. Colin Shaw stood at the head of another bed, talking fast. He was smiling the way he smiled when he felt in control. Naomi answered Ethan without looking back. "You listen. You watch the shape of breathing. You watch the numbers move the wrong way. You feel the urgency in the room." Ethan nodded like he was trying to record every word. I froze for a second. Naomi finally looked at him. "Everybody freezes. The trick is noticing it. Then you move anyway." Ethan blinked, absorbing that. "Do you ever get used to it?" Naomi's expression did not change. "You get used to doing your job." Ethan's mouth opened as if he had another question, but a nurse called his name, and he turned to help, grateful for an excuse to be busy. Naomi moved to the supply alcove again. She opened the crash cart drawer where the needle kit had been, replaced what was used, checked the seal on a new package. Her fingers went down her list, each item touched once. Not fussing, confirming. Colin Shaw walked past and slowed his eyes, catching on her hands. "Nice work back there," he said, tone clipped as if praise cost him. "Try not to make a habit of freelancing." Naomi kept her eyes on the drawer. "I did what was needed." Colin's jaw tightened. He leaned closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You stepped over me in my room." Naomi slid the drawer shut with a soft click. She turned her head just enough to look at him. The room was his. Colin stared at her. For a second, the mask slipped and he looked tired. Then it was back smooth and professional. "Stay in minor trauma," he said, "until I decide otherwise." Naomi nodded once. "Understood." Colin walked off, shoulders squared a fraction too hard. The shift rolled forward. A teenager came in with a wrist bent at the wrong angle after a skateboarding fall. Naomi reduced it with steady hands, speaking to him in a voice that stayed low and calm. His mother cried, relief and fear tangled together. Naomi wrapped the splint with clean layers and told the boy to wiggle his fingers. He did, and the first real breath left his chest. An older man arrived, convinced he was dying. Chest-tight hands, shaking eyes, wild. His heart and lungs were fine. Naomi sat him up, met his gaze, and coached his breathing until his panic loosened its grip. She did not call it anxiety. She called it pain that had nowhere else to go. A woman came in with a nail through her boot, embarrassed more than injured. Naomi numbed the area, slid the nail out, cleaned the wound, and told her not to apologize for needing help. The woman laughed, shaky. Each case was its own small story. Naomi moved through them without changing pace. She washed her hands, dried them, put on gloves, took them off, wiped counters, restocked gauze, reset rooms. Kira watched her more than once from the nurse's station. Not with annoyance now, with calculation. Near midday, the noise in the department thinned for a short stretch, the kind of lull that never lasted. Naomi stood near the hallway window, clipboard in hand, updating supply counts. Her pen moved in neat lines. She wrote numbers like they mattered, because they did. The overhead speaker crackled again, sharp enough to make heads lift. Rainier, ER incoming in 2 minutes. Male late 50s. Syncopal episode at home. Confused on scene. Vitals stable. Naomi's pen paused mid-stroke. She closed her eyes for a single breath, then clipped the pen to the clipboard and looked toward the ambulance bay doors. Naomi held her position by the hallway window as the department shifted into readiness. The lull snapped like a rubber band. A nurse pulled a clean sheet onto a gurney. Someone tore open an IV start kit. The monitors seemed to get louder as if they sensed incoming trouble. Colin Shaw appeared from Trauma 1 chart in hand, moving with the sharp efficiency he wore like a badge. Where is he going? He asked, already looking at the room like it needed to prove itself. Trauma 1 is open, Kira said. We can take him there. Colin nodded and kept walking. All right. Syncope workup. EKG labs, orthostatics. Let's not turn this into a drama. Naomi said nothing. She followed at a measured pace, clipboard still in her hand, eyes on the ambulance bay doors. They opened 2 minutes later. The paramedics came in with an older man strapped to a stretcher. Late 50s, graying hair flattened by sweat. His eyes were half-open, unfocused tracking movement with a delay that looked like a lag in a video stream. Beside him, a woman clutched her purse against her ribs as if it could hold her together. Her knuckles were white. This is Mr. Harold Pritchard, the medic said, voice brisk. Found on the kitchen floor by his wife. Wife says he has been confused since about an hour after breakfast. He went down, came back, then went down again. No chest pain reported. No trauma witnessed. Vitals stable, en route. The wife leaned in too close to the gurney. He was fine yesterday, she said. He was fine. Colin stepped to the head of the bed. Ma'am, we're going to take care of him. Harold, can you tell me your name? The man's lips moved. The sound that came out was soft and wrong, like his tongue was tired. Harold. Good, Colin said. Do you know where you are? Harold blinked. His eyes wandered past Colin, landed on the ceiling lights, then drifted back. Hospital. Colin looked pleased. He glanced at Kira. See? He's here. Kira attached leads. The monitor beeped with a steady rhythm. Heart rate 88. Blood pressure 130/82. Oxygen saturation 98. Colin pressed a pen light to Harold's pupils. Equal. Reactive. He checked lung sounds, then palpated the abdomen with firm hands. Any pain are here. Harold shook his head slowly as if the idea of pain had to travel far to reach him. Colin straightened. Probably vasovagal, maybe dehydrated. We will rule out the big stuff, but I am not seeing a crisis. Harold's wife clung to that sentence like a rope. So he's going to be okay. Colin smiled at her. It was practiced reassuring. Most likely. We will do labs and EKG and probably a CT to be safe. But his vitals look good. Naomi watched Harold's face while Colin talked. The left corner of his mouth sat a fraction lower than the right, subtle enough to miss if you were not staring at it. His gaze kept drifting to the right side of the room. When he blinked, it was slow, incomplete. Naomi stepped forward. Mr. Pritchard, she said quietly. Can you lift both arms for me? Colin's head turned a small flare of irritation. Naomi did not meet it. She held her hand out in front of Harold, palms up, like she was offering him something he could hold on to. Harold tried. His right arm rose. His left arm lifted a few inches, then sank heavy and uncertain. The wife made a sound in her throat. Harold. Naomi kept her voice even. Squeeze my fingers. She put 2 fingers in each of his hands. The right hand squeezed, the left did not. It trembled, then let go. Colin exhaled through his nose. He's groggy. He passed out. He might be weak. Naomi leaned closer, eyes on Harold's pupils again, then on the way his eyes tracked. Mr. Pritchard, look at my finger. She moved her finger across his field of vision. Harold followed it until it crossed the midline. Then his eyes stalled as if the left side of the world did not exist. Naomi straightened. Stroke, she said. The word changed the air. Kira's hands paused on the blood pressure cuff. The wife's face went pale. Colin looked at Naomi like she had spoken out of turn. His vitals are stable. He has left sided weakness and neglect, Naomi said. Facial asymmetry. Colin's jaw tightened. We have not done imaging. We do not call a stroke because someone is tired. Naomi did not raise her voice. This is not tired. The wife grabbed the bed rail. Is he having a stroke? Please tell me. Colin's eyes flicked to her, then back to Naomi. The room held a thin silence, everyone waiting for the attending to decide what the story was. Harold's left hand twitched, then his whole arm jerked. His eyes rolled up. His body stiffened. The monitor alarm screamed as the heart rate spiked and the blood pressure dipped. Kira cursed under her breath. He's seizing. Colin moved toward the airway hands, suddenly less sure. Get suction. Get benzos. Naomi was already at the bedside. She did not rush, but she arrived fast. One hand went to Harold's wrist, checking the pulse, manually fingertips pressing in a practiced way. The other hand guided his head to the side to protect the airway. Kira, oxygen, Naomi said. Kira snapped into motion, mask over Harold's face, flow turned up. Ethan hovered at the foot of the bed, frozen again, eyes darting between faces. Ethan, Naomi said without looking at him. Suction. Now. Ethan jumped as if the sound of his name cut a wire. He grabbed the suction, fumbled the tubing, then got it together and handed it over. Colin tore open a medication vial. His hands shook just enough to flash, just enough to be noticed. Naomi watched Harold's jaw, watched the rhythm of his breathing under the mask. She spoke again, steady. Call a stroke alert. Colin stared at her for 1 second. Then he snapped back into command. Stroke alert, he barked, and Kira hit the phone. Harold's seizure broke. His body went slack, breathing, shallow eyes half open again, but empty. Naomi kept her hand on his wrist until the pulse felt consistent under skin, not just on a screen. Then she looked at the wife. Ma'am, Naomi said, voice gentle but firm. When did he last seem normal? Not confused? Normal. The wife blinked hard, trying to organize time. He made coffee at 7. He was joking. Then around 9, he kept asking where his keys were. He thought the dog was outside when she was right there. Then he went down at 10:30. Naomi nodded once. So within the window. Colin looked up. 2 hours, give or take. Kira hung a new bag of saline. CT is calling back. They can take him. A neurologist arrived in a hurry, hair tucked under a cap, face sharp with focus. She stepped to the bed, did a quick exam, and her eyes narrowed. Left neglect weakness, she said. This is real. Colin's throat bobbed. We are sending him to CT now. The neurologist looked at Naomi for a beat, reading something in her posture, then nodded. Let's move. They rolled the gurney out fast. The wife walked beside it, one hand on Harold's blanket, the other pressed to her mouth to keep herself from falling apart in the hallway. Naomi followed for a few steps, then stopped at the threshold. Her job was here in the mouth of the department where new pain came through the doors. Colin paused in the corridor and turned back. The fluorescent light bleached the color from his face. You were sure, he said. Naomi kept her hands at her sides. I was watching. Colin's eyes flicked down the hall toward CT, then back to Naomi. His voice dropped. You should have said it sooner. Naomi's expression stayed flat. I did. Colin held her gaze for a moment longer than he meant to. Then he turned and walked after the gurney coat swaying behind him. Back at the nurse's station, Kira exhaled like she had been holding her breath the whole time. She looked at Naomi, and this time, there was no smile, no sarcasm. Just a quiet, unsettled interest. How did you catch that so fast? Kira asked. Naomi glanced toward the ambulance bay doors. The rain outside had thickened, turning the glass into a moving sheet. He was talking, she said. His body was answering different questions. Kira frowned, thinking, that's not how most people describe it. Naomi did not respond. She walked back to the supply alcove, opened the drawer she had restocked earlier, and replaced what they had used in the seizure kit. Her fingers moved with the same methodical certainty. One item at a time. One drawer at a time. When she slid the drawer shut, her sleeve rode up. The 550 cord showed again, worn and dull. Naomi pulled the cuff down with a small, controlled motion, as if she was closing a door. She returned to her spot near the wall, eyes tracking the hall, breathing steady. The department noise rose around her, familiar and sharp. And for a brief moment, the fluorescent buzz was only fluorescent buzz. The calm did not last long. It never did. At 11:07 a.m., the overhead speaker crackled again, sharper than before, and the voice on the other end sounded like it had been running. Rainier, ER incoming in 4 minutes. Pediatric trauma. ATV rollover with ejection. Male 11. Hypotensive. Field intubation in progress. The words hit the department like a cold splash. Chairs scraped. A supply drawer slammed shut. Someone swore softly and then moved faster. Kira was already in motion, shoulders squared. Trauma 2. Clear it. Naomi pushed off the wall and headed for the bay with the same steady pace she always used, but the steadiness had teeth. She cut through the corridor without weaving, as if the path had already been cleared. Her eyes flicked to the crash cart, then to the blood fridge down the hall, then to the monitor. Colin Shaw appeared near the nurse's station, the chart from the stroke case still in his hand as if he had forgotten to put it down. "What do we have?" he asked. 11-year-old Kira said, pressure dropping. Colin's jaw tightened. He looked toward trauma 2. "All right, 2 large-bore IVs. Type and cross. Someone call the lab. Prep for massive transfusion if needed." Kira pointed at Ethan. "You. Call radiology and tell them we are coming. Also call trauma surgery." Ethan swallowed hard. "Yes." Naomi stepped into trauma 2 and scanned the room. The bed was centered, the suction was on, the airway cart was parked close. She reached out and rotated the oxygen valve so the handle faced outward. 2 seconds. Clean. Then she moved to the ultrasound, checked that the probe was connected, and placed gel within reach. Colin walked in behind her, snapping gloves onto his hands. "Naomi, you take meds and documentation. Kira, you run nursing. I have airway and lines." Naomi did not argue. She simply nodded and positioned herself where she could see the door, the monitor, and Colin's hands. The ambulance bay doors blew open. Rain air rushed in with the metallic stink of wet asphalt and diesel. A gurney flew down the hallway, paramedics running hard, the wheels rattling like they were losing the race. The child on the stretcher was small in a way that made the equipment look too big. A tube was taped at his mouth, the tape already damp. A bag valve mask pumped in a steady rhythm by a paramedic whose forearms were tight with effort. 11-year-old male, the lead medic said, breath coming fast. ATV rollover ejected. Found unresponsive. GCS-6 on scene. Intubated in the field. 2 attempts at IV access, both blew. Pressure was 80/50, now 68/40. Heart rate 145. We gave fluid, minimal response. They transferred him to the hospital bed in one practiced motion. The sheets beneath him were stained dark with blood that had no clear source yet. His skin was pale, lips gray. The monitor beeped fast and angry. The blood pressure cycled and flashed a number that looked wrong for a child. 62/38. "He's crashing," Kira said, voice tight. Colin took the head of the bed, hands moving to the tube checking placement. Tube depth. 20 at the teeth, the medic said. Colin listened to breath sounds. Right is good, left is diminished. Bag him. The paramedic kept squeezing the bag, the child's chest rising and falling. Colin turned to Kira. "I need access. 2 large bore now. If we cannot, I am going femoral." Kira nodded, already tearing open kits. 2 nurses moved in, searching for veins in small arms that did not want to give. Naomi watched their hands. She watched the child's belly, the way it rose just a little more on one side. She watched the way the skin looked almost translucent under the lights. One of the nurses cursed as a vein collapsed. "He's blown." "Try the other arm," Kira said. Colin's voice sharpened. "Forget the arms. Femoral." He moved down the bed, grabbed a central line kit, and knelt. His body blocked the view of his hands, but Naomi could see his shoulders. They were tight. The kind of tight that showed strain. He palpated, then pushed the needle. Nothing. "Damn it," Colin muttered. He adjusted. Tried again. Blood welled at the puncture site, dark and quick, but no flash in the catheter. The blood pressure alarm changed pitch. The number dropped. 58/30. "Come on," Colin said, teeth clenched. He tried a third time. Naomi stepped closer, not crowding, just arriving. Her eyes went to the child's groin, the angle of Colin's wrist, the line of his forearm. She saw the problem. The anatomy was small, the target unforgiving, the margin for error thin. Colin's needle withdrew again. His glove was slick with blood. "We're losing him," Kira said. Colin did not look up. "I know," Naomi spoke quietly. "Let me." Colin's head snapped up. "No." Naomi did not argue with the word. She argued with time. She slid into the space beside him as if she had been assigned there all along. Her presence was calm enough that Colin shifted without thinking, giving her a few inches. He did not move away. He just made room. Naomi's fingers found the femoral pulse immediately. 2 fingers' gentle pressure, then a slight reposition. She felt it steady and faint. She inserted the catheter with a smooth motion angle precise. There was a moment of resistance, then a soft give. Blood flashed back into the chamber. Naomi advanced the line and secured it. Wide open, she said. Kira reacted instantly, hanging fluids opening the line. Running. The child's blood pressure flickered, then climbed a notch. 62/39. Not good, but moving in the right direction. Colin stared at Naomi's hands, then at the line, then at the monitor. His mouth opened, closed. He swallowed the words he had been carrying. Naomi reached for the ultrasound probe. She wiped it clean, applied gel, and placed it on the child's abdomen. The gel was cold. The child did not react. He could not. Naomi's eyes locked onto the screen. Her face did not change, but something behind her eyes sharpened. She moved through the views with methodical precision. Right upper quadrant, left upper pelvis. Her wrist stayed steady, the probe gliding pressure-controlled. She paused over the right upper quadrant. There, she said. Colin leaned in suddenly, very quiet. Kira leaned too. On the screen, black pooled where it did not belong. Free fluid, Naomi said. Morrison's pouch. Kira's breath caught. How much? Naomi angled the probe slightly, confirming. Enough. Colin's voice came out tight. That could be artifact. Naomi did not look up. It is not. She slid the probe to the left upper quadrant. Another dark pocket. More free fluid. He's bleeding internally, Naomi said. Likely splenic, possibly liver. He needs an operating room. Colin straightened. We should stabilize and get a CT. Naomi finally looked at him. Her eyes were steady, not defiant, just fixed. He does not have time for the elevator twice. Colin's jaw flexed. You do not get to make that call. Naomi's voice stayed low. You can make it or you can let it happen. Either way, he needs surgery. The room held still for a moment. The monitor beeped fast, indifferent to hierarchy. Kira picked up the phone without waiting for permission. Trauma surgery. This is Benton in Trauma 2. We have an 11-year-old with hypotension and free fluid on fast. We need you now. Colin looked at Kira as if she had betrayed him. Kira did not blink. Naomi returned to the child hands moving. She checked the line. She adjusted the drip. She listened to lung sounds again, the left still diminished but moving air. She checked tube depth eyes, scanning the marking on the plastic. 20 at the teeth. She nodded once. The child's blood pressure ticked up another fraction. 64/40. Still bad. Still alive. A trauma surgeon arrived at a fast walk, still pulling on a gown hair under a cap, face set in a hard line. Talk to me, he said. Colin opened his mouth. Naomi spoke first, not loud, not eager, just clear. 11-year-old male, ATV rollover ejection. Intubated in the field. Profound hypotension, no peripheral access. Femoral line placed. Fast, positive in right upper quadrant and left upper. Significant free fluid. He needs exploratory laparotomy. The surgeon's eyes went to Naomi, then to the ultrasound screen. You scanned him. Yes, Naomi said. Show me. Naomi placed the probe again, giving him the view he needed. The surgeon watched for 5 seconds, then nodded once. Or, he said, now. Kira was already calling transport. A nurse grabbed blood tubing. Someone shouted for the elevator. Colin stood at the side of the bed, hands hovering as if he wanted to take control back, but could not find a place to put it. Naomi looked at him for a brief moment. Not a challenge. Not a victory. Just a fact, shared between 2 people in the same room. Help me keep the airway secure, she said. Colin blinked, then nodded, moving to the head of the bed. His hands found the tube. His grip was firm now. They rolled the child out of Trauma 2 gurney wheels, rattling over the tile seams. Her lines held high so they would not snag. Naomi walked on the right side, one hand steadying the fluids, eyes tracking the monitor as they moved. The hallway narrowed into a long, bright corridor that led toward the elevators and the operating suite. The rain outside tapped the windows like quiet fingers, and the beeping of the portable monitor kept time. The corridor narrowed into a bright tunnel as they pushed the gurney toward the elevators. The portable monitor rode on the rail, its screen trembling with every seam in the tile. The numbers held in a fragile range just enough to keep moving. Naomi walked on the right side, one hand on the IV tubing, the other on the gurney frame. Colin stayed at the head, both hands steadying the endotracheal tube, as if his grip alone could keep air moving. Kira, Naomi said without raising her voice. Keep the blood ready. Kira jogged alongside for a few steps, then peeled off toward the blood fridge with 2 nurses. Already on it, she called back, breath tight. The trauma surgeon moved ahead, clearing the path with his presence. People flattened themselves against walls without being asked. A housekeeping cart rolled out of a side hallway and stopped short. The attendant pressed back, eyes wide, letting them pass. Naomi kept her gaze on the monitor. She watched the pulse waveform, not just the numbers. She watched the way it narrowed when the gurney hit a bump. She adjusted the fluid rate by feel, listening to the drip chamber with the same attention most people gave to words. The elevator doors were open when they reached them. Someone had held it. The inside smelled like bleach and damp fabric. Okay, the surgeon said. On my count. 1, 2. They rolled in. The doors slid shut, sealing them in a box of fluorescent light and breath. The elevator rose. Naomi could feel it in her knees. The monitor beeped in fast, even ticks. The bag valve mask hissed with each squeeze as Colin ventilated steady rhythm, no wasted motion. The child's face was slack lashes damp against pale skin. A bruise was blooming along his jawline, purple, spreading under the tape that held the tube. Naomi looked at him and did not let her mind attach a name. She stayed with tasks, lines, air, pressure. The doors opened to the operating floor. The air changed immediately. Cooler, cleaner, less human noise, more machines. The hallway was wide and empty, as if the building had carved out space for this exact sprint. A surgical nurse met them at the OR doors, already gloved. Room 3 is ready. Good, the surgeon said. We are coming in hot. They pushed through the double doors. Inside the room was bright enough to feel like daylight. Stainless steel trays waited in neat arrangements. The anesthesia team stood at the head, ready to take over the airway. The hum of ventilation was constant and low. Give me the story, the anesthesiologist said, eyes already on the tube and the monitor. Colin started to speak, then paused. For a fraction of a second, he looked at Naomi. Naomi delivered the handoff cleanly. 11-year-old male, ATV rollover ejection, intubated in the field. Profound hypotension. Fast. Positive in RUQ and LUQ. Femoral line in place. Fluids running. Suspected intra-abdominal bleed. The anesthesiologist nodded, hands moving to secure the airway. Any meds given? No pressors yet, Naomi said. We prioritized volume. The surgeon was already scrubbing in voice to the OR team. We go midline. We control hemorrhage. Call for blood now. A nurse took the IV tubing from Naomi's hand. Another adjusted the monitor leads. Their hands were practiced, quick, confident. Naomi stepped back as the surgical machine took over. The child disappeared behind drapes, behind bodies, behind rolls. The surgeon looked up once and met Naomi's eyes. Good catch. Naomi nodded. She did not smile. Praise did not land in her body the way it landed in other people. It bounced off and fell somewhere out of reach. Colin stood beside her at the edge of the room, still gloved, still tense. He watched the team work the way decisions became actions without debate. His jaw was clenched so hard the muscle jumped. Let's go, Kira said from the doorway. She was back, blood tubing coiled in her hands, eyes bright with adrenaline. We have a department to reset. Naomi turned first. She walked out without needing permission. Colin followed slower by a step. In the operating floor corridor, the air felt too still. The emergency department lived in constant noise. Up here, the silence left room for thought. Naomi kept her eyes on the floor tiles and counted the steps back to the elevator without meaning to. 50. 49. 48. Colin's voice broke into it. You called it fast. Naomi kept walking. He was bleeding. Colin's breath came out hard. Most residents would have gone to CT. Naomi looked at him. Not confrontational, just direct. Most residents have time. Colin's gaze dropped to her wrist where her sleeve had shifted. The faded cord showed again for a second. His eyes flicked away quickly as if he had touched something hot. The elevator doors opened. They stepped inside. The descent felt heavier than the rise, like gravity was impatient to pull them back into chaos. When the doors opened to the emergency floor, the sound hit them full force. A triage nurse calling names, a child crying in the waiting room, a monitor alarm that would not stop until someone acknowledged it. The smell of disinfectant layered over sweat and fear. Trauma 2 looked like a storm had passed through. Blood streaked the sheet and speckled the floor near the bed. Packaging lay discarded in piles. Empty saline bags hung like limp flags. The room still held the echo of urgency, even though the patient was gone. Kira grabbed a mop bucket without being asked. Everybody reset, she said. We are not getting caught with our drawers empty. Naomi went to the crash cart. She opened drawers and replaced what had been used. 1 needle kit, 1 central line kit, 2 syringes, 1 ultrasound gel packet. She moved with the same calm precision she had used on the child's femoral line. Ethan hovered near the doorway again, hands in his pockets like he was trying to keep them from shaking. He watched Naomi restock eyes following her fingertips, as if he could learn by osmosis. You okay? Naomi asked him without looking up. Ethan blinked, yes. I think so. Naomi slid a drawer shut. You did what you were told. I froze, Ethan said, voice low. At first. Naomi finally looked at him. You unfroze. Ethan swallowed. How do you do that so fast? Naomi's answer came after a beat. You notice the first second. Then you take the next one. Ethan nodded, although he did not look satisfied. He looked like someone who had been handed a key without being told what door it opened. Kira scrubbed blood off the tile with short, angry strokes. Her ponytail had come loose. A strand of hair stuck to her cheek with sweat. She glanced at Naomi. That scan, Kira said, trying for casual and missing. You ran fast, like you have done it 1,000 times. Naomi kept her hands moving. I have done it a lot. Kira's eyes narrowed. In residency, Naomi lifted a pack of gauze and set it into the drawer. In training, Kira stopped scrubbing for a moment. That is not an answer. Naomi closed the drawer. The click was soft. Busy program, she said. Kira stared at her, then went back to scrubbing. The mop squeaked against the tile. The sound felt too loud. Across the room, Colin stood near the doorway, chart in hand, watching. He looked like he wanted to say something and did not know where to start. His usual impatience was muted, replaced by something quieter. He cleared his throat. We will document the fast findings and the rapid OR transfer. Kira looked up, already charting. Colin's mouth tightened. He nodded once. His eyes slid to Naomi again. Naomi did not look back. She wiped down the crash cart handle with disinfectant. Her hands moved in circles, clean controlled. When the room was reset, the bed remade the floor dry, trauma. 2 looked innocent again, like nothing had happened, like it was not waiting for the next person to bleed on it. Kira tossed her gloves into the trash and leaned on the counter. The adrenaline was fading from her face, leaving behind a harder kind of focus. Veil, she said. Naomi looked up. Kira hesitated, searching for a tone that would not sound like an apology and would not sound like surrender. You moved in there like you knew exactly what would happen next. Naomi met her eyes. I watched the monitor. That is not all you watched, Kira said quietly. Naomi did not respond. She turned back to the crash cart and checked the defibrillator seal. Intact. Ready. Colin took a step into the bay, then stopped. He looked at the floor, at the clean bed at the cart, lined up like it had never been opened. His expression was unreadable, but his shoulders had dropped a fraction. We have a lull, he said more to the room than to anyone. Use it. Kira snorted softly. A lull is a rumor. Colin almost smiled. It did not reach his eyes. He turned and walked out. Kira watched him go, then looked at Naomi again. Something in her face had shifted. Not admiration, not suspicion. Something in between, like a puzzle piece that did not match the picture on the box. Naomi rolled the crash cart back into its alcove. The wheels squeaked once, then quieted. She adjusted its position by inches until it sat square. She checked the oxygen valve again, fingertips brushing metal. Then she returned to the hallway window with her clipboard. The rain outside had slowed to a fine mist, the kind that made the world look soft at the edges. Inside, the fluorescent buzz held steady. Naomi wrote supply counts in neat lines, numbers filling the page. Her sleeve slid back slightly as she wrote. The faded cord on her wrist caught the overhead light and dulled again. Naomi did not notice. Her pen kept moving. Naomi kept writing supply counts in neat columns, the pen gliding in a steady rhythm. Alcohol wipes, chest tube trays, suction canisters. O-negative units checked and logged. The fluorescent buzz above her held the same flat note, and the hallway smelled like damp wool and floor cleaner. Footsteps came from behind her, heavy, uneven. One foot soft on rubber, the other with a faint click that did not match the tile. Naomi did not turn. Her shoulders stayed level. Her pen did not pause until the footsteps stopped close enough that she could feel the warmth of another body in the air. Man's voice said. It was rough, older than the face that would be wearing it. The sound carried a trace of cigarettes and rain. Naomi's pen stopped mid-stroke. She stared at the number she had been writing as if it might rearrange itself into something safer. Her fingers tightened around the clipboard. Doc Vale, the man said again, softer now, like he was testing the name. Naomi inhaled once through her nose, held it, released it slowly. Then she turned not quickly, but with the controlled pace of someone who never gives their back away for free. He stood 15 feet down the corridor, close enough that she could see the water beading on his jacket. Dark spots spreading from the shoulders. He was in his 40s, maybe older, with a high haircut, grown out just enough to show he had not been near a regulation in years. A faded marine hoodie showed under the jacket, the eagle and globe cracked by time, and too many washes. His hands were big knuckles, scarred fingernails trimmed short. His right leg ended below the knee. The prosthetic was functional, not sleek, the kind built for work, not show. When he shifted his weight, the joint made that faint click again. His eyes locked onto Naomi's face and did not let go. For a moment, his expression held steady, blank with concentration, like he was lining up a memory against a living person. Then something moved in him. Recognition hit like a quiet detonation. His mouth opened, and he forgot to close it. Holy, he breathed, and the word broke apart. It is you. Naomi's grip on the clipboard tightened until her fingertips went pale. You have the wrong person. The man took a step forward. The prosthetic clicked. He did not seem to notice. His eyes stayed on her like he was afraid she might vanish if he blinked too long. No, he said. No, I don't. Naomi kept her voice even. Sir, are you here to be seen? He made a sound that was almost a laugh, and almost not. Not for me. He moved closer, slow now, respecting something he could not name. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that Naomi could smell wet canvas and cold air and the faint tang of antiseptic that clung to some people, long after the hospital had done its work. His gaze dropped to her wrist. Naomi's sleeve had ridden up as she turned. The faded 550 cord showed frayed and worn, the clasp dulled by years of touch. Her hand moved on its own, covering it. It was too late. The man's throat worked. You still wear it. Naomi's mouth went dry. I don't know what you're talking about. He did not get angry. He did not raise his voice. He only looked at her with a kind of stubborn gentleness that made her stomach tighten. Cunard Valley, he said quietly. 2012. Route security. We were moving out past the tree line. IED buried deep. It took my leg, and it took a lot more than my leg. Naomi's vision sharpened in a way she did not want. The hallway light seemed too bright, like the world had overexposed itself. She felt the weight of the clipboard in her hands, as if it had doubled. I don't, she started. You do, he interrupted, and his voice cracked on the word. He swallowed and tried again. You were the one who grabbed me before anyone else could even get to the crater. You put a tourniquet on me so fast I didn't feel it until the pain hit later. You told me not to look at the blood. You told me to look up. His eyes flicked to the ceiling like he could still see sky through it. You said count the clouds. One at a time. Stay with me, Rourke. Naomi's chest tightened. Her breath went shallow. She felt the old reflex rise, the one that narrowed the world into tasks, and seconds, the one that could keep her alive. The fluorescent buzz in her ears began to sound too much like a distant rotor. She held her face steady. My name is Naomi Vale. The man shook his head once. That's what your badge says. Naomi tried to keep her voice flat. You are mistaken. His gaze did not move. They called you Vega. The hallway seemed to tilt a fraction. Naomi's fingers loosened and the clipboard slipped from her grip. It hit the tile with a sharp slap and skidded an inch. Neither of them looked down. From the medication room, Kira Benton stepped out, then stopped short when she saw the two of them facing off. Her eyes darted from Naomi's rigid posture to the man's prosthetic to the clipboard on the floor. Everything okay? Kira asked, but her voice was cautious, like she already knew the answer was no. The man did not look away from Naomi. Lieutenant Naomi Vega, he said again, softer this time, like he was speaking to someone who needed permission to be real. Navy corpsman, attached to Marines. The one they called when it was bad. Kira's mouth parted. Naomi's hand went back to her wrist fingers, pressing the cord hard enough to leave an imprint. Stop, she said. The man flinched at the command, but he did not retreat. I'm not here to blow up your life, he said. I'm here because I walked past Trauma 2 and I saw you move. Naomi's eyes narrowed. You were watching me. I was watching a kid live, he said. And there was no accusation in it. Only fact. I know what it looks like when someone refuses to let a body quit. Footsteps sounded from the opposite end of the corridor. Fast. Confident. Colin Shaw came around the corner with a chart in his hand, and irritation already on his face, the kind that came from being interrupted. He slowed when he saw the scene. His gaze went to Naomi first, then to the man, then to Kira, standing frozen near the medication door. He looked down at the clipboard, then back up. What is going on? Colin asked. The man finally glanced at Colin. The look he gave him was brief and blunt, like checking an object for worth and finding none. She saved my life, the man said, turning back to Naomi immediately. A long time ago. Colin frowned. Dr. Vale is a resident here. If you need medical attention, we can get you registered. The man's lips pressed into a thin line. She's more than that. Naomi's voice sharpened, still quiet, but edged. That's enough. Kira stepped closer, drawn in despite herself. You know her from the service. The question came out before she could stop it. The man nodded. Not the service like paperwork. Like sand. Like rotors. Like screaming into a radio while someone bleeds out in your hands. Colin stared at him. What are you talking about? The man's eyes cut to Colin again. She was Navy. A lieutenant. We had a name for her. Ghost Doc. Because she showed up when things went to hell and people came back from it. Kira let out a small sound, half disbelief, half something else. Colin's face had gone pale in the fluorescent light. Vale, he said, and his voice lost its usual certainty. Is this true? Naomi held his gaze. For a moment, the corridor noise seemed to fall away, as if the hospital itself leaned in to listen. Yes, she said. It was one syllable. It landed hard. Colin blinked. His mouth closed, then opened again. Why didn't you tell anyone? Naomi's eyes did not soften. Because it does not matter. It matters, Kira said, and she sounded like she hated that it mattered. Naomi's jaw tightened. It mattered then. It does not belong here. The man shifted his weight. The prosthetic clicked again, a small mechanical reminder that the past had consequences that did not stay polite. He looked at Naomi with something like understanding. You changed your name. Naomi did not answer. He nodded as if the silence was answer enough. His gaze dropped to her wrist again, and Naomi's fingers tightened over the cord. I didn't come to accuse you, he said quietly. I came to say thank you. Naomi's throat worked. You don't have to. I do, he said, and his voice thickened. You told me to stay. I stayed. I got out. I learned how to walk again. I met my wife. I have a daughter who thinks my leg is the coolest thing in the world because it has metal in it. His mouth twitched into a small, real smile. It vanished fast, swallowed by the weight in his eyes. That girl exists because you kept talking to me all the way to the bird, he said. You kept telling me what you were doing, like your voice could hold me in my body. It did. Kira's eyes glistened and she looked away, pretending to study the floor. Colin stared at Naomi as if he was seeing a new layer of the person he had dismissed. Naomi's face stayed controlled, but her breathing was tight. She swallowed once. What is your name? The man's smile came back careful this time. Mason Rourke, he said. Staff Sergeant, retired. In case you want the formal version. Naomi nodded once. The name was a weight that settled into a place inside her that had never emptied. Rourke held out his hand. Naomi looked at it for a beat too long, then took it. Their grip was brief but firm. His palm was rough. His fingers shook once, a small tremor of emotion he did not hide. Thank you, Doc, he said, for then. Naomi released his hand. You should see someone about that stump, she said. Voice clipped, reaching for something practical. Rourke's smile widened, grateful for the normalcy. Already got a guy. He'd say it's working as designed. He stepped back. I won't do this again, he added. I won't show up and call you by a name you don't use. I just needed you to know. Naomi nodded. She did not trust her voice. Rourke glanced at Colin and Kira, and his expression hardened, slightly protective in a way Naomi did not want. Whatever you think you know about her, he said, you don't. Then he turned and started down the corridor toward the exit. His gait was uneven, but practiced. The prosthetic clicked softly against tile, fading with distance until the hallway swallowed the sound. Silence rushed in behind him. It sat in the space like heavy fog. Kira picked up the clipboard from the floor with slow hands and held it out to Naomi. Lieutenant, she said, and the word came out before she could reshape it. Naomi took the clipboard without looking at her. No, Colin's voice was quieter than Naomi had ever heard it. Vega. Naomi met his eyes. Vale. Colin stared at her for a moment, then looked away, jaw working. He seemed to search for anger and could not find enough of it to cover what else was there. Kira's voice dropped. You were in combat. Naomi's fingers tightened on the clipboard. I was in a job. Kira shook her head slightly. That is not the same thing. Naomi did not answer. She turned and walked toward the break room, not fast, not slow. The same steady pace she always used. The fluorescent buzz followed her down the corridor. Behind her, Colin and Kira remained where they were, still recalculating the shape of the person who had been standing near their wall the whole time. Naomi pushed the break room door open and stepped inside. The air was warmer here, thick with coffee that had been burned into surrender. The beige walls looked freshly wiped and permanently tired. A stack of paper cups sat crooked beside the sink. Someone had left a sandwich in the fridge long enough for the smell to become a question. She did not pour coffee this time. She filled a paper cup with water cold from the tap and held it without drinking. Her hands stayed steady, but her fingers pressed the cup just hard enough to crease it. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. It was the same note as the hallway, the same low electrical insistence that never fully went quiet. Naomi stared at the wall, jaw tight, and let her breath find a rhythm. She could still hear the click of the prosthetic in her head, like a metronome that had learned her name. Mason Rourke, Vega, Ghost Doc. Naomi closed her eyes for 1 second. Not long enough to fall, long enough to shut a door. Her hand slid under her sleeve to the 550 cord. She pressed the frayed weave against her skin until it grounded her in something physical. The clasp felt cold, familiar, unchanging. Voices passed outside the door. Someone laughed too loud for the hour. A monitor alarm chirped and then stopped. Naomi opened her eyes. The wall was still beige, the cup still crumpled in her hand. She took 1 sip of water. It tasted like pipes and chlorine. It tasted like now. The door opened again. Kira Benton stepped in first, moving like she had somewhere to be and was forcing herself to stop. Colin Shaw followed a step behind, chart still in his hand posture, stiff as if he had been braced for an impact. They did not speak right away. The silence was not empty. It was crowded with what they had just learned. Kira's eyes flicked to Naomi's wrist. Naomi kept her sleeve down. Colin set the chart on the table too hard. "That guy," he said. "Rourke." Naomi did not answer. Colin ran a hand over his face, then dropped it. "You were Navy." Naomi's gaze stayed on the water cup. "I was." Kira let out a breath that sounded like frustration. "And you just never thought to mention it." Naomi looked up then. Her eyes were calm, but they did not offer comfort. "We do not trade resumes in trauma too." Colin's jaw flexed. "It changes how people see you." Naomi's mouth tightened. "That is the point." Kira leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Why change your name?" Naomi did not move. "Because I wanted to work without being pulled apart." Colin stared at her, pulled apart by what? Naomi's gaze held his. Questions. Stories. People looking for something to admire or blame. Kira's expression softened for half a second, then hardened again as if she did not trust softness. "You saved that kid today." Naomi's eyes dropped. "The surgeon is saving him." Colin's voice rose, then caught himself and fell back into something quieter. "You made the call. You pushed it." Naomi took another sip of water. The cup crackled. "We are here to do the work." Colin opened his mouth again, then stopped. His eyes flicked to the door, to the sounds beyond it. The department noise had a new edge now, like it was stacking problems behind a dam. Kira's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, and her face changed. Before she could speak, the overhead speaker crackled. The dispatcher's voice cut through the hospital like a blade. "Rainier ER, be advised. Mass casualty incident. Collapse at the waterfront construction site. Multiple injuries. Estimated 18 to 25 patients. Mixed severity. First units on scene. First arrivals in 10 minutes. The break room went still. Even the coffee pot seemed to stop gurgling. Kira looked at Colin. Colin looked at Naomi. The fluorescent buzz pressed into the silence. Colin moved first, pushing off the table. His voice tried to find authority, tried to snap into place like a lock. Okay. We need extra staff. Call in backup. Get the operating rooms on standby. We need to clear hallway beds, we need." "Stop," Naomi said. It was not loud. It did not need to be. Colin froze mid-sentence. Kira's eyes went to Naomi like she had been pulled by gravity. Naomi set the water cup on the counter. She did not rush, but everything in her posture changed. Her shoulders squared, her hands hung loose and ready at her sides. Her gaze sharpened, not hard, just focused. "We do not have time to build a committee," Naomi said. "We have 10 minutes. Colin's mouth opened. He closed it again. Naomi walked out of the break room and into the corridor, Kira and Colin behind her. The emergency department was already stirring staff, picking up the tension and responding with half-formed motion. Naomi stepped into the center of the department near the nurses' station. People turned toward her without being told to. Even those who did not know why felt the shift. It was the way she stood, like she belonged in the middle of chaos. "Kira," Naomi said, "you run triage outside the ambulance bay. You get colored tags. Red goes straight to Trauma 1 and Trauma 2. Yellow holds in the main hallway with vitals monitoring. Green goes to the waiting room with one nurse assigned and a tech for rechecks." Kira blinked once, then nodded. "Got it." Naomi pointed at Ethan Price. "Ethan, you are on airway supply and suction. Stay between Trauma 1 and 2. You restock and you move equipment. You do not wander." Ethan swallowed. "Yes, Dr. Vale." Naomi's eyes moved to the blood fridge. "Someone check our O negative and call lab for rapid cooler delivery." A nurse lifted a hand. "I will." Naomi turned to Colin. "You take Trauma 1. I take Trauma 2. Colin's reflex flared. "I am the attending." Naomi met his eyes and held them. Her voice stayed level. "Then act like one. Hold Trauma 1. Delegate. Do not try to do every procedure yourself. Colin stared back, jaw tight. He looked as if he wanted to push back on the order. Something in Naomi's gaze stopped him. It was not threat. It was experience that did not ask permission. He nodded once. Fine. We rotate teams every 3 patients, Naomi continued. People get tunnel vision. We do not. Kira was already moving. She grabbed a triage kit and 2 rolls of tape. She called 2 nurses by name, and they fell in behind her without argument. Naomi raised her voice slightly, just enough to carry. Crash carts to the doors. Airway kits on top. Chest tube trays opened and staged. Ultrasound in each trauma bay powered and ready. Hands moved, drawers opened, plastic tore. Someone ran past with a stack of blankets. Another tech dragged a portable monitor into the hallway. Colin barked orders into Trauma 1, trying to sound steady. His voice cracked on the first sentence, then recovered. He pulled himself together and started assigning roles, and for once he did not fight the structure Naomi had put down. He fit into it. Naomi walked into Trauma 2 and made the room obey her. She moved the crash cart 3 feet closer to the bed. She shifted the ultrasound to her left so she could reach it without stepping away from a patient. She checked suction tubing, then oxygen, then the airway tray. She set a box of gloves on the counter where hands could grab without looking. She counted supplies fast. Not with panic, with clarity. 2 chest tube kits, 3 decompression needles, 4 units of blood in the small cooler. Not enough, but a start. Her fingers brushed the 550 cord at her wrist as she turned. The cord snagged slightly on her glove cuff. She pulled it free without looking down. Outside, Kira was establishing triage in the rain. Naomi could see her through the glass doors. Kira's ponytail was already damp. She stood under the overhang clipboard in one hand, tags in the other. Her voice carried firm and sharp, cutting through the noise of the arriving units. Red to the left, Kira called. Yellow in the middle. Green to the right. If you can walk, you walk. A fire captain pointed toward the incoming ambulances, speaking quickly. Kira nodded and adjusted her stance. She looked like a person who had been waiting her whole career for this moment without knowing it. Inside, Naomi watched the entrance and listened. Sirens started in the distance, thin at first, then louder. The sound layered over the rain until it became a constant wail that did not belong to the city. It belonged to the hospital now. Colin came to the doorway of Trauma 2 eyes, scanning Naomi's setup. We need more hands, he said. We will use what we have, Naomi answered. Ask for float nurses and respiratory to stage. No one stands idle. Colin nodded and moved away. Ethan hurried past with a stack of airway supplies, eyes wide, but moving. He almost tripped over a cord, caught himself, and kept going. Naomi stepped back to her spot near the wall, the place where she could see everything at once. The department swelled with motion, but her breathing stayed even. She watched Kira outside, watched the rain bead on the glass, watched the ambulance bay doors as if she could will them to open slower. The first unit pulled in and brakes squealed wet on concrete. Doors flew open. A paramedic jumped down and waved. Kira raised a red tag and pointed. The ambulance bay doors opened and the noise of rain and sirens rushed into the department like a flood. The ambulance bay doors opened and the sound hit like weather. Rain, sirens, shouted directions that blurred into one urgent language. The first gurney came through fast wheels, rattling paramedics bent over a man whose face was masked in blood. Kira snapped a red tag onto the stretcher rail without hesitating. Trauma 1. Move. 2 nurses peeled off and ran with the gurney. Colin Shaw caught it at the threshold of Trauma 1, hands-up voice, already assigning roles. Another stretcher followed, then another. The bay became a conveyor belt of bent metal and wet jackets and wide eyes. Naomi stood in Trauma 2 near the wall, the place where she could see the door and the monitor and the crash cart all at once. She did not stare at the people bringing the injured in. She watched the patterns, the way hands shook when they were scared, the way a paramedic's voice changed when the patient was close to slipping away. Kira's voice came through the doorway in clipped bursts. Yellow. Hallway. Sit him up if you can. Green, waiting room. Keep moving. A man stumbled in under his own power, holding his forearm at an angle that was wrong. Blood ran down his wrist in thin lines mixing with rainwater. Green, Kira said, then paused, eyes narrowing. She stepped closer, took the man's chin, turned his face to the light. No. Yellow. You are not green. The man blinked slow. His pupils were not the same size. A nurse guided him to a hallway bed. The next stretcher that rolled into Trauma 2 carried a woman with gray hair and a construction vest still on. Her vest was soaked, not from rain. The sheet beneath her was dark and sticky. 64-year-old female, the medic said, breathless. Fell when the scaffold went. Possible pelvic fracture. Hypotensive on scene. Pressure in the 70s. We gave fluids. Naomi moved in. On my count, she said, and helped transfer the woman to the bed. Her hands were firm, gentle enough not to add pain, strong enough to control motion. Kira stepped into the bay for 1 second, slapped a red tag on the bed rail, and vanished again. Naomi's eyes went to the monitor. Heart rate 130, pressure 76/40. Oxygen saturation 95, but the waveform looked thin. She looked at the woman's abdomen. It was distended, firm. The woman's eyes were open, fixed on the ceiling, like she was trying to climb out of her body. Ma'am, Naomi said, look at me. The woman's eyes found her. They were glassy. My legs, she whispered. We will check everything, Naomi said. Right now, I need you to keep breathing. A nurse pushed an IV into the woman's arm, then another into the other arm. Blood tubing hung ready. Naomi grabbed the ultrasound probe. Gel. Probe to the abdomen. Her wrist stayed steady as the room moved around her. Free fluid pooled black in the screen. Positive, Naomi said. She is bleeding. A nurse asked, do we call surgery? Naomi did not look up. Yes. Now. The nurse was already on the phone. Naomi pressed her fingertips into the woman's pelvis gently. The woman made a small sound and her eyes squeezed shut. Pelvic binder, Naomi said. Tight. The binder went on. The woman's pressure ticked up by a few numbers, fragile improvement. Naomi turned her head toward the doorway. Hallway runner, she called. Ethan appeared out of breath, holding a tray of supplies like it was a lifeline. Here. Bring blood to Trauma 2, Naomi said. Oh, negative if you have it. Then bring another ultrasound gel pack. Do not stop in the hallway. Ethan nodded hard and ran. The next patient arrived before the binder straps were fully secured. A man in his 20s, face raw with road rash, breathing shallow and fast. His chest moved like it was trying to separate from itself. Every inhale pulled in with effort. Fell from the platform, the medic said. He was walking, then he dropped. Complains he cannot breathe. We suspect rib fractures. Naomi saw it immediately. The paradoxical movement, a segment of ribs giving way. It was subtle, but it was there. Flail segment, Naomi said. The medic blinked. He was talking. He will stop, Naomi replied. She put a hand on the man's chest, light pressure not to hurt to confirm. He gasped, eyes flaring. Non-rebreather, Naomi said. Call respiratory. Get him imaging, but do not let him sit. Monitor for contusion. A nurse moved. Naomi's voice stayed calm and low, but it carried authority that did not depend on volume. The bay filled with motion. Staff moved in a practiced dance that was not fully practiced yet. People were learning Naomi's structure as they ran inside it. Through the glass, Kira worked the triage line in the rain. Red tags moved toward the trauma bays. Yellow tags stacked in the hallway. Green tags drifted toward the waiting room with a tech guarding the door, rechecking pulses and pupils like the world depended on it. Sirens kept arriving. The ambulance bay never emptied. Colin's voice rose from Trauma 1, strained and sharp. I need another set of hands in here. Naomi turned to the nurse at her side. Go, she said. 2 minutes, then come back. The nurse hesitated. Naomi's eyes held steady. The nurse ran. Naomi returned to the older woman with the pelvic binder. Blood arrived. The line ran in. The woman's face regained a hint of color. The monitor beeped indifferent. A stretcher slammed into the bay, with a man who had been pinned under a piece of metal. His leg looked wrong, twisted above the knee. The skin over his thigh was stretched tight, bruising already dark. Crush injury, the paramedic said. Hypotensive tachy. Naomi glanced at the leg, and then the man's face. He was sweating hard, breathing fast, eyes darting. Pain control, Naomi said. Then traction splint. Watch for compartment syndrome. A nurse moved toward the meds. The man grabbed Naomi's sleeve. Please, he said, voice breaking. Please. Naomi put her hand over his firm. Stay with me, she said. Look at me. His eyes locked on hers. His grip loosened a fraction. From the hallway, a code alarm sounded. A different pitch. A different kind of urgency. Naomi's head turned toward it. Her eyes tracked the sound like a compass needle. A yellow tag had just turned into something else. Kira's voice rose tight. He is not breathing. Move. Naomi stepped out of trauma 2, just far enough to see down the hall. A man lay on a hallway bed, skin gray, mouth slack. A nurse started compressions. Another tried to bag. A tech fumbled with an oxygen tank. Naomi moved toward them without running. Her pace did not change, but she arrived fast. She checked the man's carotid pulse. Nothing. Time, she said. Start counting. A nurse looked up. What? 2 minutes, Naomi said. We go hard, then we decide. The nurse's eyes widened. Then she nodded, jaw set, and pushed harder. Naomi took over the airway. She positioned the head, sealed the mask, and bagged with controlled rhythm. She watched the chest rise. She watched the monitor. Flat. She signaled for epinephrine. A syringe appeared in her hand. She pushed it and returned to the airway. The 2 minutes felt long and short at the same time. Naomi's mind tracked the seconds without a clock. 50. 49. 48. At 0, the rhythm did not return. Naomi looked at the nurse doing compressions. The nurse's arms shook. Stop, Naomi said. The nurse froze. Naomi kept her voice steady. We move. The nurse's face tightened, anger and grief flashing together, but she stopped compressions. The man lay still. The hallway swallowed the sound and moved on. Naomi turned back toward trauma 2. Kira stood a few feet away, tags in hand, rainwater dripping from her hair. She had witnessed the moment. Her eyes held something raw and unsettled. Kira started. Naomi's gaze did not flinch. We save who we can. Kira's mouth pressed into a line. She nodded once hard and turned back to triage. The next wave hit. A woman came in with a deep laceration to the scalp, blood pouring down her face like paint. A man arrived with a forearm fracture so open, bone showed white under rain streaks. A teenager staggered in, holding his side, breathing shallow. Naomi worked through them in sequence. Clamp, pressure, suture. Splint, reassess. Each task clean. Each decision simple in the way only hard things could be simple. Then the sound changed again. At first it was distant, low felt, more than heard. The windows trembled. A deep, rhythmic thump pressed into the building. The fluorescent buzz in the ceiling seemed to get swallowed by it. Heads lifted. People paused mid-motion and looked toward the windows. Naomi felt it in her chest before she fully named it. Rotor wash. Heavy air beaten down. Outside above the ambulance bay, the sky was a sheet of gray. Rain fell slantwise. Then a shape appeared through it, dark and angular, descending with a controlled authority that made everything else look fragile. A military helicopter. It dropped onto the rooftop pad, like it had done it 1,000 times. The building shuddered. The sound filled every hallway. Colin stepped out of trauma 1, face tight with confusion. What is that? Naomi did not answer. Her eyes were fixed on the glass doors at the front of the department. The thump continued steady, not frantic. The kind of sound that meant people who lived with it had learned to control it. The ambulance bay doors opened again, but this time, it was not a gurney that came through first. It was 2 figures in camouflage, wet with rain, moving with the posture of people who did not ask for space. Space made itself. One wore the insignia of an officer. His hair was gray at the temples, his jaw shaved clean. The other was a woman with a hard set to her shoulders, carrying 2 heavy cases that looked like they belonged in a field tent, not a county hospital. The officer's eyes swept the department once. He took in the triage line outside the yellow tags in the hallway, the blood on the floor that had been cleaned in streaks, the way staff moved with a mix of fear and determination. Then his gaze found Naomi. He walked straight to her. He stopped 3 feet away and raised his hand in a crisp salute. "Lieutenant Vega," he said. The words landed like a weight. Naomi's breath caught just once. She did not return the salute. Her hands stayed at her sides. "I am not active," she said. "I know," he replied. He lowered his hand. "Colonel James O'Keefe. We were running a training exercise north of the base. We heard the mass casualty call. Then I heard your voice on the emergency frequency." His eyes stayed on her, steady and familiar, in a way she did not want to admit. Naomi's jaw worked. "This is civilian. It is people bleeding," O'Keefe said. "It is the same thing." The woman with him set the cases down with a thud. She looked at Naomi, then at the room, and nodded as if receiving instructions she already understood. O'Keefe glanced toward Kira outside, then back to Naomi. "We brought a med team. 4 corpsmen. Supplies. Blood warmers, whatever you need." Naomi's eyes flicked to the cases, then to the hallway where yellow tag patients waited, then to Trauma 1, where Colin stood like he had been pushed into a different universe. "We need triage support and runners," Naomi said. "We need hands that do not panic." O'Keefe nodded once. He turned his head slightly and spoke into the radio on his shoulder. His voice was calm. Command voice, the kind that made chaos behave. "Actual to team. Deploy to ground level. Coordinate with hospital staff. Take direction from Lieutenant Vega." A crackle answered immediately. "Roger." The woman stepped forward. "Gunnery Sergeant Lila Knox," she said. Her voice was flat, efficient. "Point me." Naomi gestured toward the doors. "Outside. Triage. Then send 2 runners inside to blood and airway." Knox nodded once and moved, already peeling a medical armband from her sleeve and securing it as she walked. Colin found his voice. It sounded smaller than usual. "Lieutenant." O'Keefe finally looked at him. The colonel's expression was not cruel. It was simply unimpressed. "She was the best I ever saw," O'Keefe said, then looked back at Naomi as if Colin did not matter. "Good to see you alive." Naomi did not respond to that. Her throat felt tight. She swallowed it down and returned to work. "Trauma 2 is mine," Naomi said to her team. "Listen, we do not cluster. We move. 1 person speaks at a time. Call out vitals. If you do not know, you say you do not know." People nodded. The next gurney slammed through the doors with a man whose chest rose and fell in shallow stutters. His lips were blue. "Tension pneumo," the paramedic shouted. He was fine, then dropped. Naomi was already opening the drawer. The needle kit was in her hand before the stretcher fully stopped. Kira was outside, but now Knox was there beside her, moving through the triage line like a blade. Red tags snapped on. Yellow tags redirected. Green tags pushed away from danger. Inside, 2 camouflaged corpsmen appeared in the hallway, with oxygen tanks and a case of supplies. They moved without asking where to go, following the motion of the department like they could read it. Naomi inserted the needle cleanly. The hiss came again, air escaping under pressure, and the man's chest expanded. "Chest tube," Naomi said. A corpsman set the tray down beside her without being asked. Naomi glanced at him. He did not look starstruck. He looked ready. In Trauma 1, Colin fought to keep pace. He intubated 1 patient, then moved to a bleeding scalp wound, then to a fractured femur, voice assigning tasks in bursts. He was working hard, and it showed. Every time he glanced through the window into Trauma 2, he saw Naomi moving through chaos like she had memorized it. She did not rush. She did not stall. She did not waste motion. She spoke quietly, and people moved. The casualties kept coming. Sirens, boots on tile, rainwater puddling by the doors. At one point, Naomi looked up and realized her sleeve had ridden back. The 550 cord was visible. A corpsman's eyes flicked to it, then away. No comment. No question. Just a tiny nod, like he understood the language of frayed paracord. 2 hours passed in a series of hard snapshots. A compound fracture reduced and splinted. A laceration stapled closed. A man with internal bleeding pushed to the elevator toward the operating floor. A woman with a crushed hand given pain control and careful reassurance. A child with a concussion kept awake, spoken to gently pupils, checked and checked again. When the last red tag patient was stabilized and moved out, the department did not feel like it was celebrating. It felt like it had survived weather. The sirens thinned. The triage line outside shrank. The hallway beds held quieter patients' yellow tags, watching, waiting. Naomi stood in trauma 2 and peeled off her gloves. Sweat dampened the collar of her scrubs. There was blood on her shoes. That was not hers. Her hands were steady. O'Keefe stepped into the doorway. The colonel's uniform was damp at the shoulders, rain darkening the fabric. His eyes swept the room, taking inventory. "Or has the last two," he said. Naomi nodded once. She wiped her hands with sanitizer, the alcohol sting sharp against small cuts she had not noticed yet. O'Keefe's gaze held on her for a beat. "You ran it well." Naomi's voice was quiet. "We did." O'Keefe accepted that with a small nod. He raised his hand in salute again. Naomi looked at him for a long moment. Then her hand came up crisp and controlled and returned it. The colonel lowered his salute and turned away, already moving, already shifting his focus to getting his people out of the hospital without making more mess than they had to. Naomi stayed where she was for a breath. The fluorescent buzz settled back into the foreground. The rain outside tapped on the glass. Somewhere down the hall, someone laughed too loudly out of relief, then stopped as if embarrassed. Naomi set a new pair of gloves on the counter, straightened the crash cart by inches, and stepped back to her spot near the wall. Her eyes tracked the doors, not because she expected the next wave, but because she could not stop watching them. Naomi stayed by the wall until the last gurney disappeared down the hall and the noise thinned into something that almost resembled normal. The doors kept opening, but now it was stretchers heading to imaging transporters with paperwork, a family member carrying a wet jacket. The kind of movement that meant the wave had passed, not the kind that meant it was coming. She walked back into trauma 2 and began the reset without speaking. She stripped the bed, folded fresh linen with squared corners, wiped down the rails, restocked the drawer where the decompression needles lived. Her hands moved in a quiet sequence. Open, replace, seal, close. She checked the oxygen valve again, then the suction, then the defibrillator. One clean touch on each item, like tapping a fence post to make sure it was real. Kira stepped into the bay with a trash bag and a mop bucket. Her hair was damp and sticking to her neck. Rain had dried into salt tracks on her cheeks, not tears, not yet. "You were right about the 2 minutes," Kira said, voice low. Naomi did not look up. "It is never right. It is just what is there." Kira swallowed. "I hate it." Naomi nodded once, as if agreeing with something obvious. She tossed a bundle of packaging into the trash. The plastic made a soft crackle as it fell. In the doorway, Colin Shaw hovered for a moment, chart forgotten in his hand. He looked like he was trying to decide whether to enter or leave, whether his words had any right to take up space. Naomi kept working until she felt him settle. Then she turned slightly. "You need something." Colin cleared his throat. "Break room. When you can." Naomi nodded. She finished tightening the seal on a drawer, then rolled the crash cart back into its alcove and adjusted it by inches until it sat square. Only then did she walk. The break room was quiet. The coffee pot had been replaced with a fresh one at some point, and the smell was less burnt, more sharp. Fluorescent light hummed overhead, the same flat note, the same insistence. Colin sat at the small table, elbows on the surface, hands clasped as if he was holding himself together. Naomi stood across from him for a moment, then sat. Not close, not far. The distance of two people who had worked side by side and still did not know what to do with what they knew. Colin stared at the tabletop. "Why did you not tell anyone?" Naomi's eyes stayed on his hands. "Because it never helps." "It would have helped me," Colin said. The sentence came out rougher than he intended. Naomi took a slow breath. "You treated me like I was weak." Colin flinched. "I treated you like you were slow." Naomi's mouth tightened. "Same thing in this place." Colin dragged a hand through his hair. "I watched you today. I watched you run that department. Naomi did not react. She waited. Colin's voice dropped. You were not guessing. You were not lucky. You were certain. Naomi's left hand slid to her wrist under the cuff of her sleeve. She pressed the cord with her thumb until the pressure grounded her. Certainty is just practice with consequences. Colin looked up. His eyes were tired. Tell me the part I do not know. Naomi held his gaze for a long beat, then looked away toward the beige wall. I was a corpsman, attached to a Marine unit. 2 deployments. I came home with a new name because I wanted a new life. Colin's jaw worked. And the bracelet. Naomi's hand paused at her wrist. Names, she said. Colin did not speak. He waited, which was new for him. Naomi pulled her sleeve back. The faded 550 cord lay against her skin, frayed and worn. The clasp was dull metal, shaped smooth by touch. 19, she said. That is how many I lost. Colin's throat tightened. You told me you saved people. I saved 58, Naomi said. Her voice stayed steady, but her eyes did not. And I lost 19. I remember every one. The order, the sound of their breathing changing, the way their hands felt when they went cold. Colin looked like he wanted to interrupt, to fix it, to argue the numbers into a different truth. He did not. Naomi's fingers traced the cord once. This is not a trophy. It is a weight. I wear it so I do not forget what it costs when I am not fast enough. Colin's eyes flicked to her wrist and held. That is not fair to you. Naomi gave a small shrug. Fair is not a setting. Silence filled the room. The hum of the lights seemed louder in it. Colin leaned back slowly. I am sorry, he said. It was not polished. It was not a performance. I saw what I wanted to see. I saw someone quiet, and I decided quiet meant unsure. Naomi looked at him. Quiet means I am listening. Colin nodded once, like the sentence landed somewhere tender. I want you leading the new trauma drills, he said. Not as a favor, as a necessity. We are not going back to what we were. Naomi's face stayed controlled. I do not want attention. I am not offering attention, Colin said. I am offering resources. Naomi considered him for a moment, then nodded once. Then we do it right. Kira came into the break room a few minutes later, as if she had been hovering outside the door waiting for the right moment. Her posture was stiff. Her hands were empty, but her fingers moved like she still held tags. She stopped in front of Naomi. I need to say something, she said. Naomi waited. Kira's eyes flashed with the effort of it. I called you slow. I said you did not belong. I said you were careful like it was a flaw. Naomi did not blink. Kira swallowed and continued. I was wrong. Naomi's voice was quiet. You did not know. Kira shook her head. I should not need a war story to respect a doctor standing next to me. Naomi's gaze softened a fraction, barely visible. Apology accepted. Kira let out a breath like she had been holding it for days. Then her eyes lifted, and there was something else in them now, not guilt. Hunger. Will you teach me? She asked. Not just protocols. The way you see. Naomi glanced at Colin, then back to Kira. Simulation lab. Thursday. 6. Kira's face changed relief and determination, blending into something almost bright. I will be there, she said, and left before she could say too much and ruin the courage it took to ask. Near the end of the shift, Naomi went to her locker. The hallway was quieter now, but the kind of quiet that felt temporary. She opened the metal door and saw an envelope taped inside, plain and unmarked. She peeled it off and opened it with careful fingers. The note inside was written on hospital letterhead in tight handwriting. Dr. Vale, thank you for not giving up on my son today. The boy from the waterfront. They told me he would not make it. He is in the ICU right now, and he squeezed my hand when I spoke. I have worked in this hospital a long time, and I have seen people decide a life is already gone. You did not. I will not forget that. Naomi read it twice, then folded it and slipped it into her pocket. She closed the locker and stood still for a moment, hand resting on the metal, breathing evenly as the weight in her chest shifted into a new shape. 2 days later, Mason Rourke walked into the emergency department again. Naomi saw him before he reached the desk. His gait was the same uneven rhythm, the soft click of the prosthetic against tile. This time, he carried a cardboard box that looked heavier than it should. He stopped near the nurse's station and set it down gently. "From the people you patched up," he said. Naomi looked at the box. "You did not have to." Rourke's smile was small and stubborn. "Yeah, we did." Naomi opened it. Inside were letters. Dozens. Some handwritten on notebook paper, some printed emails, some cards with photos tucked inside. Faces in uniforms and faces in civilian clothes. Babies held up to the camera. Wedding pictures. A kid in a soccer jersey. A man holding a fishing pole and grinning like he had won something bigger than a fish. Naomi's throat tightened. She did not cry. She held the box like it might break if she held it wrong. Rourke watched her with a steadiness that felt familiar. "You carry the ones you lost," he said quietly. "We wanted you to have room for the ones who made it." Naomi nodded once because anything more would have been too much. Rourke touched 2 fingers to the brim of his cap in a small salute that was not for show, then turned and walked out without waiting for gratitude. The click of his prosthetic faded down the hallway, and this time the sound did not cut Naomi open. It anchored her. Weeks passed, then months. The emergency department changed in small, deliberate ways. Crash carts were reorganized so the airway gear lived where hands reached first. Triage flowcharts appeared on the walls in clean, laminated sheets. A schedule went up for drills, and people showed up for them, sometimes grumbling, sometimes eager, always learning. Ethan Price stopped hovering in doorways. He started moving, then speaking, then making calls with a steadiness that grew each shift. Kira got sharper, not louder. She asked questions that mattered and listened hard for the answers. Colin changed too. He stopped performing control and started building it. He began to hand off tasks without resentment. He deferred when someone else saw something first. He learned that leadership could sound like a quiet voice that everyone still obeyed. In early autumn, the hospital held a dedication ceremony in the new wing. The day was cold and clear. Tacoma sky washed pale, the air smelling faintly of salt from the water. Staff gathered in folding chairs. Administration stood near a podium with practiced smiles. Local press hovered at the edges. Families stood in clusters, hands in pockets, shoulders pressed together against the chill. Naomi stood near the back, the box of letters in her locker, the 550 cord on her wrist under her cuff. She could see Rourke in the crowd, wearing a suit that did not fit his shoulders quite right. Beside him stood a few other men with that same posture, the kind that never fully left. Colonel James O'Keefe was there too, in civilian clothes, still carrying himself like an officer. Gunnery Sergeant Lila Knox stood near the wall, arms crossed, eyes scanning exits out of habit. The hospital chief executive spoke into the microphone about readiness and community and excellence. The words were smooth. People nodded. Then he gestured to a plaque covered by a white cloth. "It is my honor," he said, "to dedicate this training space to those who serve twice." He pulled the cloth away. The plaque read, "For those who serve twice." Naomi's breath caught. Not because her name was missing, because it was not about her. It was about the work. The chief executive turned toward Naomi. "Dr. Vale," he said, "would you say a few words?" Naomi walked to the microphone. Her steps were steady. The crowd quieted, and the silence felt different from the silence of a trauma bay. It felt expectant, warm, human. Naomi looked out and found faces. Kira standing straight, eyes bright. Ethan, hands clasped, trying not to look like a kid. Colin watching her with a respect he did not know how to hide now. Rourke, chin lifted. A woman near the front holding a small child who waved without knowing why. Naomi rested her fingers briefly on her wrist on the cord beneath the cuff, then let her hand fall. "I am not good at speeches," she said, voice clear. A small ripple of laughter moved through the crowd, soft and kind. Naomi continued. I am good at showing up. I am good at doing what needs to be done when there is no time to be afraid. That is not special. That is the job. She paused, letting the words settle. This center is not about one person. It is about a standard. It is about making sure the next time the call comes in, we move like a team instead of a room full of individuals. Her eyes flicked to the staff. We will fail sometimes. We will carry it. We will also carry the people who walk out and go home. We do not get to keep only the easy parts of this work. She swallowed once, then steadied. So we train. We get better. We build something that holds when the worst day shows up at our doors. Naomi stepped back from the microphone. Applause rose, not polite, not forced. It filled the space and pressed against her chest in a way that felt unfamiliar. After the ceremony, Naomi found a quiet corner near a window and pulled out her phone. She opened a thread she usually avoided. Her therapist at the Veterans Clinic had sent a simple check-in message earlier that week. Naomi typed, "I am doing okay. Better than okay. Thank you for staying with me." She sent it and slid the phone back into her pocket. Outside the emergency department, lights glowed against the early evening warm squares in a building that never fully rested. Naomi stood for a moment, listening to the muffled sound of the hospital behind the doors. Then she turned and walked back toward the corridor, toward the buzz of the lights, toward the steady work waiting inside.